The boy's torture. The screams of the tortured human boy echoed throughout the sterile white halls of the Galactic Council's research station. The Sban, a super-advanced alien race, had kidnapped him. For months, his wails haunted the station as Hector, their sadistic chief scientist, dissected and experimented on him day after day. Scalpel sliced skin while engineers calibrated machines to inflict maximum pain. Bone saws whirred and needles poked, all in the name of Hector's twisted curiosity. He wanted to see how much agony a human child could endure before he broke. Hundreds must have heard those blood-curdling screams, but nobody did anything. The council knew, of course. The high and mighty representatives of 100 species simply didn't care. Sban technology was too valuable, their cloaking devices too powerful, so the council let those twisted butchers continue their horrific work. The boy's father was a humble farmer named John Sanders. He begged the council to help, to save his son. He got on his knees, wept, and pleaded. The bureaucratic aliens called his boy's torture an internal Sban matter and told the primitive humans to shut up and let the superior races handle things. The sheer unmitigated gall to ignore a father's pleas was beyond belief. John's hands trembled as he piloted his rickety shuttle back to Earth. He had failed his boy. Those soulless bureaucrats on the council had turned their backs, content to let a child suffer for their political gain. But John wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. He flew straight to the EDF's Central Command Center, a towering fortress bristling with cannons and swarming with steely-eyed soldiers. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge. It's urgent," John said, his voice hoarse from hours of useless pleading before the council. The guards looked him up and down, noting the wild desperation in John's eyes. They must have seen something there, a father's indomitable will to save his child, because they waved him through. John found himself standing before Admiral Samir Patel and General Wei, the top brass of the EDF. These were men who'd seen countless battles, who'd stared down the worst the galaxy had to offer. "Sir," I'm John Sanders. "My boy, he's been taken by the Sban. They're torturing him, and the council won't lift a finger. Please, I'm begging you." Patel held up a hand, his eyes narrowing. "We know who you are, Mr. Sanders. We've been monitoring your son's situation." Wei leaned forward, his jaw set. "We've seen the evidence of what those sadistic bastards are doing. Rest assured, we have no intention of letting it continue." John nearly collapsed with relief. Finally, someone was listening. Someone was willing to act. The EDS response. Patel and Wei wasted no time. They sent a single blunt message to the Galactic Council: return the human child and any other prisoners, or prepare for war. The Council scoffed at the ultimatum. Humanity was a minor species, a footnote in galactic history. What could they possibly do against the might of 100 worlds? They soon found out. The EDF had been busy, quietly building its strength, developing weapons and ships that far outstripped anything the galaxy had seen. And now, a massive human fleet appeared in Sban space, an armada that dwarfed the Sban defenses. The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as sleek human battleships, their hulls gleaming with advanced energy shielding and bristling with plasma cannons, stared down the Sban forces. It was a sight no one had ever expected to see. The primitive, pacifistic humans had transformed into a military juggernaut overnight. The ESS Retribution hung in the void, an avenging angel poised to strike. A flotilla of EDF battleships flanked the flagship, their weapons primed and ready. On the bridge, Admiral Patel stood ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen displaying the Sban research station. "Hail them," Patel ordered, his voice calm but laced with steel. The comms officer nodded, fingers flying over the console. A moment later, the sneering face of Hector, the Sban chief scientist, filled the screen. "Admiral Patel," Hector drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Patel's jaw tightened. "You know damn well why we're here, Hector. Release the human child, and any other captives immediately. Hector threw his head back and laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed through the bridge. "Oh, Admiral, you humans are always so sentimental." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "The boy is Sban property now. We'll do with him as we please." Patel's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You sick bastard. If you don't comply, we'll—" "You'll what?" Hector sneered. "Attack us? Please. Your primitive ships are no match for Sban technology." As if to punctuate his point, Hector tapped a button on his console. The view screen split, revealing a second image. Patel's blood ran cold. It was the boy, John's son, strapped to a table. Sban scientists swarmed around him, wielding scalpels and syringes. The child's screams tore through the audio feed, a wrenching primal sound of pure agony. On the bridge of the Retribution, the crew stood in horrified silence. Patel's breath came in short, sharp bursts, his entire body shaking with barely contained rage. "That," he said softly, "was a mistake." The retaliation. Patel turned to his weapons officer, a hard-faced woman named Leo. "Fire," he said, his voice like ice. Leo nodded, her fingers already dancing across the console. "Aye, sir." In an instant, the EDF ships unleashed hell. A storm of kinetic rounds, plasma beams, and graviton torpedoes slammed into the Sban station, the barrage so intense that the view screen whited out for a moment. When the image cleared, the station was a ruin, gaping holes torn in its hull, fires raging across its surface. The Sban ships, sleek and deadly, swarmed out to meet the EDF fleet. They opened fire, their advanced weapons lancing out toward the human ships. But it was futile. The EDF shields absorbed the blows, shrugging off the Sban assault like raindrops against a window. "Their shields are down," Lou reported, her voice rising with excitement. "We're tearing them apart." Patel leaned forward, his eyes hard as he watched the Sban ships burst into flame, one after another. They were no match for the EDF's might, their vaunted technological superiority proven to be nothing more than a hollow boast. In mere minutes, it was over. The research station was a shattered husk, the Sban fleet reduced to drifting debris. On the bridge of the Retribution, the crew erupted into cheers, hugging and clapping each other on the back. But Patel remained stoic, his gaze fixed on the ruined station. "Send in the Marines," he ordered. "Find that boy and any other survivors. And if Hector is still alive, bring him to me." His voice dropped to a whisper, a cold promise of retribution. "I want to look him in the eye before we put him down." The rescue. Admiral Patel and General Wei weren't about to leave that boy behind, not after all he'd suffered. They gathered an elite team of EDF Marines, the toughest sons of humanity had to offer, and personally led a boarding party onto that ruined hellhole of a station. The Marines stormed through the smoke-choked corridors, their boots pounding against the metal deck. Sban soldiers popped out from every shadow, their weapons spitting plasma. But the EDF troopers were quick on the trigger, gunning down the bastards before they could even scream. Patel and Wei fought their way deeper into the station, toward the hidden labs where unspeakable atrocities had been committed. They blasted through sealed doors and mowed down squads of Sban guards, their faces grim and splattered with alien blood. And then, in a dark chamber reeking of chemicals and suffering, they found him. The boy, John's son. He was strapped to a metal table, his small body a patchwork of cuts, bruises, and needle marks. Blood pooled beneath him, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. For a moment, Patel and Wei could only stare in horror at what had been done to this innocent child. Patel stepped forward, his hands shaking as he tore away the restraints. He lifted the boy in his arms, cradling him like he was the most precious thing in the universe. Wei took point, his rifle raised and ready as he scanned for any remaining threats. "I've got you, son," Patel whispered to the barely conscious child. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." The Marines formed a protective circle around Patel and the boy, their weapons bristling outward as they fought their way back to the shuttle bay. Sban soldiers threw themselves at the human formation in waves, desperate to recapture their prized test subject. But the EDF troopers put them down with cold efficiency, their rifles flashing in the dim emergency lighting. While Wei and the Marines held off the last frantic Sban assault, the hatch slammed shut, and the small craft lifted off, blasting away from the ruined station and back toward the waiting EDF fleet. In the shuttle medbay, doctors swarmed over the boy, stripping away his blood-soaked rags and assessing his injuries. Patil watched from the doorway, his face a mask of barely contained rage. This child, this innocent, had suffered horrors beyond imagining, and for what? The twisted curiosity of some sadistic alien. As the shuttle docked with the Retribution, a transmission from the Sban homeworld burst across the view screens. It was Hector, his face contorted with fury and madness. "So you think you've won, humans?" he snarled, spittle flying from his lips. "You've only sealed your doom. We will hunt you to the ends of the universe. We will flay the skin from your bones and use your skulls as..." Patel stepped forward, his eyes hard as iron. He stared directly into Hector's holographic face and spoke 6 words that would echo through the ages. "You should have let him go." With a flick of his wrist, Patel cut the transmission. He turned to Wei and the other officers on the bridge, his voice low and filled with a terrible, righteous anger. "This is only the beginning. The Sban, the Council, the whole damn galaxy, they think they can torture our children and get away with it. They think humanity is weak. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Patel clenched his fist, his knuckles white against the dark fabric of his uniform. "We're going to burn them. Every last one of them. We're going to hunt them down and make them pay for what they've done. And when we're finished, the galaxy will never forget the day they crossed the human race." The campaign of vengeance. From the bridge of the Retribution, Patel stared at the view screen, his face chiseled from stone. On the surface of the Sban homeworld, cities burned. Skyscrapers toppled, crushed by the relentless bombardment from the EDF fleet. Plasma beams lanced down from the heavens, vaporizing entire city blocks in the blink of an eye. "No mercy," Patel said, his voice cold as the void of space. "They showed none to our children. We will show none to them." The Sban scrambled like ants whose hill had been kicked over. Ships lifted off from spaceports, desperate to escape the apocalypse raining down upon them. But the EDF had planned for this. A wall of human steel surrounded the planet, an impenetrable blockade that stretched as far as the eye could see. Sban ships, sleek and swift, raced toward the gaps in the net, hoping to slip through and flee to safety. The EDF guns thundered in response. Kinetic rounds tore through hulls, spilling bodies and debris into the void. Plasma beams sliced ships in half, leaving them drifting as molten wreckage. "This is Admiral Patil of the Earth Defense Force," Patil said, his voice booming across every frequency. "Your atrocities end now. Any further aggression against humanity or any other species will be met with the full might of the EDF." On the surface, Sban soldiers rushed to defensive positions, manning anti-orbital cannons in a desperate attempt to fight back. The EDF answered with a rain of graviton torpedoes, bunker-busting warheads that cracked the planet's crust and sent shockwaves rippling through the Earth. The cannons fell silent, crushed beneath tons of rubble. "We offered you a chance for peace," Wei said, his eyes hard as he watched the destruction unfold. "You chose torture and cruelty instead. Now you pay the price." The Council's ships hung at the edge of the system, a glittering array of 100 races. They watched in stunned silence as the EDF meted out its merciless judgment. A few, the boldest, tried to intervene, their ships darting toward the battle. Patel turned to the comms officer, his eyes narrowing. "Open a channel. Wideband, all frequencies." The officer nodded, his fingers flying over the console. "Channel open, sir." "This is a message to the Galactic Council," Patil said, his voice ringing with authority. The Sban's crimes against sentient life are unforgivable. We are doing what you lack the courage to do. Do not interfere, or you will share their fate." There was a moment of silence, a held breath across the stars. Then, slowly, the council ships began to turn away, their engines flaring as they fled back to their own worlds. They had seen the fury of humanity unleashed, and they wanted no part of it. On the Retribution's bridge, the crew watched as the last of the Sban ships was shattered, their wreckage joining the growing debris field around the planet. The once great civilization, the scourge of the galaxy, was no more. All that remained was a broken husk of a world, its surface scarred by the wrath of an avenging humanity. Patel turned away, his eyes hard and cold in the light of the burning planet. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice a low growl. "The galaxy will learn to fear the name of humanity, and God help any who stand in our way." The aftermath. The medics worked furiously over David's broken body, their faces grim and their hands steady. They'd reset shattered bones, stitched together torn flesh, and pumped him full of antibiotics and painkillers. It was touch and go for weeks, the boy hovering on the brink of death, his vital signs spiking and plummeting like a roller coaster. But David was a fighter. He clung to life with the same tenacity that had kept him sane through months of torture. Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. His wounds closed, his bones knitted, and color returned to his pale cheeks. When he finally opened his eyes, clear and lucid for the first time since his rescue, Admiral Patel was there at his bedside. The grizzled soldier held the boy's hand, his voice soft as he spoke. "Welcome back, son. You're safe now, and I promise you, we'll make sure no other child ever suffers like you did." David's story spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Every newsfeed, every holo-channel, every data stream carried the tale of the boy who had endured the unthinkable and survived. He became a symbol of humanity's resolve, a reminder that even the weakest among us could be unbreakable. But while David healed, Hector plotted. The Sban scientist had managed to slip away in the chaos of the bombardment, stealing the ship and vanishing into the depths of space. He was a broken man, his life's work destroyed, his people scattered to the winds, but his hatred for humanity burned hotter than ever. In the dark corners of the galaxy, Hector gathered the remnants of the Sban military, soldiers, scientists, spies, anyone who had a grudge against humanity. He forged alliances with other races who had been humiliated or defeated by the EDF, promising them a chance at revenge. They called themselves the Vengeful Claw, a name that struck fear into the hearts of humans across the stars. They were a shadow army, striking without warning and vanishing before the EDF could respond. Human colonies burned, outposts were reduced to rubble, and the Vengeful Claw left no survivors, only shattered bodies and smoking ruins. But the EDF was not about to let these atrocities go unanswered. Admiral Patel and General Wei mobilized every ship, every soldier, every weapon at their disposal. They vowed to hunt down Hector and his minions to the ends of the universe if need be. And they had a secret weapon, one that would strike terror into the hearts of the Vengeful Claw. The final battle. In the depths of the EDF's most secure research facilities, scientists had been hard at work, building on the technology they had captured from the Sban. They had created a new breed of soldier, one that was faster, stronger, and smarter than any human or alien. They called them the Avenging Angels, and they were ready to unleash hell on the enemies of humanity. David moved through the shadows of the lunar base, his enhanced senses alert for any sign of the Vengeful Claw. Behind him, his fellow angels fanned out, their weapons at the ready. They had trained for this, honed their skills to a razor's edge. They were humanity's best hope against the twisted remnants of the Sban. As they approached the central chamber, David's augmented hearing picked up the sound of muffled sobs. The hostages. His grip tightened on his rifle, the cool metal a comforting weight in his hands. He signaled to his team, and they took up positions around the entrance. With a silent countdown, They breached the room, flashbangs and smoke grenades rolling across the floor. The vengeful claw soldiers, caught off guard, fell before they could even raise their weapons. David and his team moved with ruthless efficiency, cutting down the enemy with precise bursts of gunfire. And then, through the clearing smoke, David saw him. Hector, the Sban scientist, stood at the far end of the room, a cruel smile twisting his features. He held a detonator in one hand, his finger poised over the trigger. Ah, the famous angels. Hector sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. I was wondering when you would show up. David trained his rifle on the Sban's head, his finger resting on the trigger. It's over, Hector. Release the hostages and surrender, or we'll take you down. Hector laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the metal walls. Oh, I don't think so. You see, I've rigged this entire base to explode. One press of this button, and we all go up in flames. David's eyes narrowed, his enhanced vision picking out the details of the detonator. It was a dead man switch. If Hector released the trigger, the bombs would detonate. He calculated the odds, his mind racing through 1,000 scenarios. There was only one way this could end. Angels, take him down, David barked, his voice ringing with authority. They moved as one, a blur of speed and power. Hector's eyes widened in shock as the angels closed the distance, their movements too fast for his Sban reflexes to follow. A volley of stun rounds slammed into his chest, sending him crashing to the floor. David was on him in an instant, his boot pinning the Sban's hand to the ground, the detonator still clutched in his grasp. He reached down, his fingers closing around Hector's throat. This is for every child you tortured, David growled, his voice low and dangerous. For every life you ruined, for every atrocity you and your kind committed. Hector's eyes bulged, his free hand scrabbling at David's unbreakable grip. But it was useless. The angel's strength was unmatched, his resolve unshakable. As the light faded from Hector's eyes, David felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Justice had been served, the victims avenged. But he knew this was only the beginning. The vengeful claw was still out there, scattered across the galaxy. And he and his fellow angels would not rest until every last one of them was brought to heel. David rose to his feet, the detonator clutched safely in his hand. He turned to his team, their faces grim beneath their helmets. Secure the hostages and set the charges. We're burning this place to the ground. As the angels moved to comply, David allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought back to that scared, broken child he had once been, strapped to a table in a Sban lab. He had come so far, endured so much. And now he was more than just a survivor. He was a protector, a guardian of the innocent. And God help any who stood in his way.